There's a family in northern Italy that has for more than 200 years been quietly terrified of going to sleep. Not because of nightmares, because of what happens when the sleep stops coming at all. It starts small. A man in his early 50s notices he's sweating for no reason. His pupils shrink to pinpoints. He sleeps a little worse than he used to. Then a little worse. Then one night he lies down and nothing happens. No drowsiness, no drifting off. His brain has simply forgotten how. And from that night forward, he will never sleep again. Not with pills. Not with sedatives strong enough to drop a horse. Not ever. He has, on average, about 18 months left. This is one of the rarest diseases on Earth. Fewer than 40 families in the world are known to carry it. There is no cure, and until very recently, there wasn't even a serious attempt at one. This is its file. Let's start with what we know for certain, because the certain parts are strange enough on their own. The disease is called Fatal Familial Insomnia. The name is almost rude in its honesty. Familial, it runs in families. Insomnia, you stop sleeping. Fatal, it kills you. There is no fourth word, because there doesn't need to be. It is what's known as a prion disease, and to understand why that one word makes neurologists go quiet, you have to understand that a prion breaks a rule we thought couldn't be broken. Almost everything that can make you sick, a virus, a bacterium, a fungus, a parasite, carries instructions. It has genetic material, DNA or RNA, a little blueprint it uses to copy itself inside you. A prion has none of that. A prion is just a protein, a single ordinary protein that your own body already makes, folded into the wrong shape. That's it. That's the whole weapon. A misfolded version of a protein you've been carrying your entire life. And here's the part that genuinely should not work. When that one misfolded protein bumps into a normal, healthy version of itself, it doesn't damage it. It converts it. It reaches out and forces the healthy protein to fold into the same wrong shape. And now there are 2, then 4, then 8. It is a chain reaction made of shape. No instructions, no code, just one bad fold, teaching the next, spreading through the brain like a rumor that turns out to be lethal. The normal protein is called PRPC. The misfolded killer is called PRPC. They are, atom for atom, the same protein. The only difference between the version that keeps you alive and the version that kills you is the way it's bent. So, where does the sleep go? Here's the first exhibit, and it's the cleanest part of the whole case. Deep in the center of your brain, roughly between your ears, there's a structure about the size and shape of 2 small walnuts. It's called the thalamus. For a long time, people thought of it as a relay station, a switchboard that passes signals from your senses up to the thinking part of your brain. But the thalamus does something else, something that turns out to matter enormously here. It helps run the machinery of sleep. It's part of the system that powers down your cortex at night, that pulls you under into the deep, slow waves of real rest. In Fatal Familial Insomnia, the misfolded prions attack the thalamus first. They hollow it out. Under a microscope, the tissue of a patient who has died from this disease looks like a sponge, riddled with microscopic holes where living neurons used to be. The medical word for it is spongiform. The same word, the same family of disease as mad cow. So, the story seems almost tidy. The prion eats the part of the brain that runs sleep. The sleep stops. The patient dies. Except, and this is where the file stops being tidy, that explanation has a hole in it of its own. And we'll come back to that hole because it's the most unsettling thing in here. First, let's follow what actually happens to a person. Because the cruelty of this disease is in its sequence. It almost never starts in someone young. The average age of onset is around 50. By then, most people who carry the gene have already lived a full life, built a career, raised children, passed the gene to some of those children without anyone knowing. The first stage lasts about 4 months. The insomnia arrives and it gets worse fast, but it comes with company, strange company. The body's autonomic system, the part that runs all the things you never think about, starts to misfire. Blood pressure climbs, the heart races, the patient sweats and runs fevers. The pupils contract to tiny points. Some patients begin, oddly, to sleepwalk through movements while technically awake, reaching for objects that aren't there, miming the act of getting dressed. The second stage brings panic attacks and phobias. Hallucinations creep in. In the third stage, the patient cannot sleep at all. Total, absolute insomnia. And something eerie happens here that researchers have a name for: agrypnia excitata. The patient drifts into a state that isn't waking and isn't sleeping. They act out dreamlike sequences while their eyes are open. The brain, denied the door to real sleep, starts leaking dreams into the waking world. The fourth and final stage is dementia. The patient stops responding. The weight falls away, and within roughly a year and a half from that first sleepless night, it ends. Through almost all of it, the cruelest detail holds. The mind often stays clear far longer than the body. For long stretches, the person knows exactly what is happening to them. They can feel themselves being kept awake. They understand that the floor of sleep has been taken away and will not come back. Now, here is the honest detour. The part most retellings of this disease skip, and the part that, if you're paying attention, is the actual mystery. I told you the story was tidy. Prion eats the thalamus, sleep dies, and the thalamus damage is real. But when researchers went looking carefully for the misfolded prion protein itself inside the thalamus of FFI patients, the killer, the PRPSC, they kept finding a problem. There's barely any there. In studies examining the brains of people who died of this disease, the thalamus shows the devastation, the neuron loss, the holes, the scarring. But the actual deposits of misfolded prion are often sparse in the thalamus or close to absent. The heaviest deposits show up somewhere else entirely, in a region called the entorhinal cortex. Sit with that for a second. The place that gets destroyed is not clearly the place where the poison piles up. So, what's killing the thalamus? If it's not a mountain of misfolded protein sitting right there, then the damage is happening by some other route. A loss of the normal protein's function, maybe, or a toxic process that travels, or something we haven't named yet. The honest answer, as of right now, is that the precise mechanism connecting the prion to the dying thalamus is still not fully understood. We have a disease where we know the gene, we know the protein, we know the broad shape of the catastrophe, and we still cannot draw a clean line from cause to effect inside the one organ that matters. That's not a gap in a textbook. That's a gap in the middle of one of the most studied rare diseases in medicine. Here's an exhibit that makes the whole thing land differently. I want to give you one honest number. The gene responsible is called PRNP, and the specific change that causes this is at a single spot, position 100 to 78. One letter, in a genome of 3 billion. That's the difference between a normal life and this. But it gets stranger because of a second spot, position 129, that sits nearby like a switch. If you carry the 178 mutation, what that second position says determines which disease you get. One setting, and you get Fatal Familial Insomnia, the sleep version. The other setting, with the exact same primary mutation, and you instead develop a form of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which looks completely different, a rapid dementia, not an unraveling of sleep. Same mutation, same family even. And a single neighboring letter decides whether you lose your memory or lose your sleep before you lose your life. It is one of the cleanest examples in all of human genetics of how astonishingly little separates two completely different fates. And if you inherit the FFI version, if a parent carried it, your odds are brutally simple. It's what's called autosomal dominant. You need only one copy. Each child of a carrier has a 50% chance of inheriting it. And, as far as anyone knows, if you inherit the mutation, you will develop the disease. There is no maybe. The gene is, in the language researchers use, almost fully penetrant. Imagine knowing that. Imagine being 30 years old, watching your parent die over 18 months of sleeplessness, and knowing there's a coin in your body that was flipped before you were born, and you're not allowed to see which way it landed. For most of medical history, that was the entire story. A family curse with a known cause and no exit. But the file does not end there. And this is the part that, for the first time, has something in it that looks like hope. There's a scientist named Sonia Valav. In 2010, she watched her mother die of a sudden, mysterious illness. It took time to identify, but eventually the answer came back. Prion disease. And then came the second blow. Sonia got tested. She carries the mutation. The fatal one. She was a young woman, recently married with a normal career, and a genetic near certainty hanging over her. Most people, understandably, would not have done what she did next. She and her husband, Eric Minikel, both left their careers. They went back to school. They retrained themselves from scratch into scientists, into prion researchers, for the explicit purpose of finding something that could save her life, and the lives of everyone in those 40 families before her own clock runs out. And they got somewhere real. Working with a pharmaceutical company, they helped drive the development of a drug, a type called an antisense oligonucleotide. The idea is elegant, and it dodges the unsolved mechanism problem entirely. Instead of trying to clean up the misfolded protein after it forms, the drug goes upstream. It interferes with the genetic message that tells your cells to make the prion protein in the first place. Make less of the raw material, and there's less of it available to misfold. In mice, lowering that protein delayed the disease and extended survival dramatically, even when treatment started near the onset of symptoms. That drug is now in a real human trial. And here's the most current detail in this entire file, the one you should recheck against the news if you're watching this much later than its upload. As of early 2026, the trial is ongoing, and it had just been expanded. The first rounds of dosing came back, in the careful words of the people involved, Neither a disaster nor a home run. Safe enough to keep going, but not yet the knockout blow. So they reopened it, added a higher dose, and pushed the timeline further out, still chasing the level that lowers the protein enough to matter. That is what hope looks like in real science. Not a miracle, a reopened trial, a higher dose. Another year of work, run by a woman who is, in the most literal possible sense, racing her own genome. So, let's close the file. Fatal Familial Insomnia is a disease that breaks several of our assumptions at once. That you need genetic code to spread. That the part of the brain that dies is the part where the poison gathers. That a death sentence written into a single letter must stay a death sentence forever. It takes the most ordinary thing a human being does, lying down at the end of the day and slipping out of consciousness, and reveals it as something fragile. Something the brain has to actively do. Something that can be taken away. Most of us treat sleep as the thing that happens when we stop. These families know the truth that the rest of us get to ignore. Sleep is not the absence of effort. It is an act. And somewhere in the center of your head, two small walnut-shaped knots of tissue perform that act for you, every single night, without ever being asked. There are fewer than 40 families carrying this. There's one woman who rebuilt her entire life into a laboratory to try to beat it. And there's a trial, open right now, that does not yet know how it ends. Whoever's watching this in 50 years, you may already know whether she won. We don't, not yet, the file stays open.